This is my discussion slash review for 911 Season 6, Episode 11, titled In Another Life. And I gotta say, I didn't see it going this way, but it turned out pretty good. Let's talk about it.
Live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have a vision. I go by at night, I be in my feelings, I'm a big fight.
The title of this episode was very evident throughout the entire episode because we see that Buck is being rushed into the hospital and everybody's super concerned and worried, and Bobby's spouting out all this stuff he knows about Buck, like, well, he's prone to blood clotting, he's allergic to this. And I thought that was a very nice moment. And then we cut to Maddie and her mom having a very emotional, wonderful moment with them knowing their family history, and boom comes a knock at the door, and Maddie mom's answer, and then Maddie comes over, and all Maddie could think was, which one is it? Because we know, because of the courtesy call, they were going to come for Chim or Buck, and Maddie was like, which one is it? Now, we knowing that it's Buck, we knew what was going on, but like in that moment, it was very emotional and very raw for Maddie and her mom and stuff. So it was a nice way that they done about it, but like, it was very emotional, man, because throughout this entire episode, I got teary and misty eyed, man, because I was worried for Buck a few times in this episode. Now, with the title In Another Life, we see that Buck kind of has this moment to where he's in a coma. They had to put him in a medically induced coma, and while he's in a coma, he's in another life that seems to be pretty wonderful, like, if you can believe it or not, you know what I'm saying, until it takes a dark turn, because his brother's alive, Daniel's alive, Daniel's a doctor, Maddie seems to be happy, so to speak. His parents love him and are very affectionate towards him. But Buck soon realizes that this world is not all it's cracked up to be, because Maddie is still married to Doug. Doug's still abusive. They have a daughter together, and he hasn't been a firefighter because he's been a teacher, and everybody's lives at the 118 have kind of derailed because, Buck wasn't there to intervene, because we know Buck was a very important part or pivotal part to the 118. And like I said in last week's review, Buck is kind of our eyes and ears into the firehouse, but because Buck wasn't there, everybody's lives kind of took a dark turn. Eddie lost Christopher, and then Christopher ended up dying. He and life pretty much stayed the same. But, Chim isn't with Maddie. They don't have Ji-yoon. Bobby is kind of off the rails. Then they said that Bobby kind of died. Like, there was so much tragedy and horror in this world, and Buck realizes that. But I love how there were subtle substances throughout the entire episode with Buck being trapped in the coma world. We see a lot of the connections to the real world through little objects in the coma world. The airplane, the Ferris wheel, the fire truck. Like, there's so many moments in there where Buck kind of realizes, well, you know what? Yeah, this isn't right. But then I feel like that shock to his system was Doug. Seeing Doug alive and still being married to Maddie, that would traumatize anybody, because we're done with Doug. Let's be 100%. We are done with Doug, man. But we also realize how Buck was there for everybody throughout this entire episode with him in the coma world. Buck was there for everybody. We see him stepping up to the plate for so many people, even when they didn't really want him to be around. And then everybody kind of gathered this episode for Buck. Christopher going to see Buck when he was in the hospital, even though they had to sneak him in there. Eddie, feeling a little heartbroken. Chim feeling a certain type of way. Albert went to see him. Everybody was there for Buck because Buck was there for everybody else. But Buck had a lesson to be learned in this episode, and he had to learn that before he could escape the coma world. And that is that, you don't live your life for everybody else. And that was Buck's biggest problem. He was trying to live his life to appease his parents and trying to garner their attention. And then he done the same thing with his family at the 118. Buck was trying to do so much stuff for everybody else. And until he learned that lesson that, he needed to live his life for himself in the coma world, he wasn't able to come back until then. I love the fact, though, that even though he was in the coma world, like, the stuff still kind of clicked, and he was still able to kind of meet everybody. And sure, they didn't really know him, but he knew enough facts about them to convince them to believe him. And I really love that, man. Basically talking about Chim and Hen, but then we see this weird drugged out Bobby, which I wasn't feeling that Bobby at all. But in the real world, we also see that Bobby was just losing himself, man. But Buck coming back, it was like a weight lifted off of Bobby's shoulders. And we see that May was so adamant about trying to help Bobby because sure, she loves Bobby. I mean, you know, Bobby's her stepfather, but he's her father too, you know what I'm saying? What I loved is because the connectivity this episode, man. Athena went to see Buck. Everybody's trying to comfort Bobby because they don't want Bobby to kind of just go off the rails, especially after losing Wendell. And I love this episode that it took Athena and May to say it, but Buck is like a son that Bobby always wanted. You know what I'm saying? Like he was there for Buck ever since the very beginning, ever since Buck came to the 118. And I love when May was like, well, Mom brought 2 kids into the marriage, but you brought one yourself, which happens to be Buck. But it was such a great episode, so well-rounding. And when Buck came out of the coma world, you know, he knew stuff that he really shouldn't have knew, you know what I'm saying? And the fact that his mom and dad finally see him as Evan Buckley and not, you know, the donor for his brother or anything like that. And his connection with Maddie, it was just a great episode, man. I felt like it was very short, like, you know, the runtime didn't change or anything, but it just felt very short because we were dealing with so much emotional stuff. But it was a fantastic episode overall. Chim and his father even came and got a little closer. He asked them to extend their stay. You know, it was great, man. I love seeing Albert yet again. Great episode all around. And like I said, 911, they're trying to change things a little bit. Like I said, last week's episode kind of got back to the basics, but this is something that's pretty much done in almost all TV shows or whatever. You know, you have that one episode where somebody needs to have an epiphany or something like that, and that's what this episode was for Buck. And now I feel like we can get with that and we can move forward to deal with some of the other stuff that's going on with some of the other characters. But overall, I really love this episode, man. It was different, but like different in a good way. This was incredible. Don't forget to smash the like button so you can't smash any more. Comment down below and I'll be sure to respond to each and every one of them, and subscribe. Peace out.
I cannot complain because today, I'm doing my